So I thought it was interesting when we discovered by accident that we all voted the same way in the referendums. But without getting into how we voted, and maybe we will in a few minutes, but what was it all about?
Wasted 23 million, that's what it was all about. It was parachuted on top of us, badly explained, badly worded. Would have been a dream day for the barristers and solicitors. Would have had heaps of fun, making loads of money.
They have a few of them lately.
You've had a few of those days yourself, I know. But they would have made heaps of money trying to decipher what the meaning of those two referendum were if they had been passed. Listen, it was very close to the last day when I made my mind up. And certainly on one of them. But they were so resoundingly beaten. And resoundingly beaten in working class areas. Wiped out in working class areas. 79, 80, 90% in some working class areas. So, I don't know, there was an arrogance, I thought, on behalf of the government.
Stevie, you listened to the bishops. You took your instruction from the bishops, did you?
He did.
All I can say is they didn't seem too concerned when they were being interviewed over the last few days about the result. There wasn't any weeping and gnashing of teeth. It's amazing how they can come up with referenda that are indeed so-called social issues and ignore the real issues that we need referenda on, like housing and health and things like that.
Water.
Water is probably the greatest single example where they've given promises and broken their word year in, year out and kicked it to touch. But I listened to Willie O'Dea on the radio, who admitted that he never campaigned for it and he didn't like it at all.
But it was cynical, Brendan.
Yeah.
They launched it on International Women's Day, right? It was a cynical type of PR stunt that they thought they were going to ingratiate themselves with, and it fucking backfired big time on them, right? To the extent that I think about 4 or 5 days in they gave up. Other than Baraka making an idiot of himself on that interview I spoke about, the rest of them went into hiding. I mean, Roderick and co, they vanished off the
No
face of the
price
earth.
to pay anyway.
Well, a few things struck me about it, and we won't keep our vast multitude of viewers in suspense any longer. We all voted yes, no, and we didn't discuss it beforehand.
Yeah.
We didn't discuss it until we were having a chat earlier on, actually. But without getting into the reasons for that, there's no point rehashing the debate. But I think it's common cause now that the wording of both referendums was appalling.
Absolutely.
It seemed to come from nowhere. The Constitutional Forum was ignored in terms of the care one specifically. But what I'm amused by, and it comes as no surprise to me that the government got a sound kicking on them all. I'm surprised by two things. I suppose I shouldn't be surprised at anything anymore. I'm surprised that, first of all, that virtually the entire opposition, including the far left, at least began the campaign canvassing for yes, on complete rubbish. Now, you don't have to be a constitutional lawyer. You don't ever have to have gone to law school. You don't have to have a school certificate to read those two wordings and know that it was complete hyperbole.
Absolutely.
Yet the government, the government are arrogant, they're hubristic. We've seen that in Leo Varadkar's interview, his Thatcherite interview, about how he sees care. Good for you, Leo, that you have the wealth and the background that allows you and your family to take care of everybody who may fall on hard times in relation to care in your family, but every family isn't like that. It was Margaret Thatcher's "there's no such thing as society." So that surprises me. What the hell are the opposition at? I'm not just talking about the political opposition. The National Women's Council of Ireland have an awful lot of respect.
The Irish Congress of Trade Unions.
The Irish Congress of Trade Unions. What the hell were they thinking? And then, in addition to that, I really am amused since the outcome. Everybody won this. They say success has many fathers. The church won it. The far right won it. The country are listening to the bishops again. Ronan Mullen won it. Michael McDowell won it. The fascists won it. The racists won it. And the reality is, I know, for example, single parents that voted no to the first referendum, which would have recognised single parent relations with the Constitution just to give the government a kicking. So nobody won this. Everybody just wanted to see through it.
I think the problem is the people who've queued up to take the kudos are the type of people we don't want anything to do with ourselves. and the worst elements of our society. It's a big issue too for this whole constitutional forum where they bring people in, because that was giving them, the government, cover in the past to do things which they thought wouldn't necessarily be universally popular. But now they've got something from them that they've absolutely ignored. So why would anybody want to get involved in that again in the future? They've damaged something that could have been useful to them in the future.
The Constitutional Forum was held up internationally as something really positive in a democracy.
What damage do you think the alignment of all those forces, the bishops, Michael McDowell, Ronan Mullen, the Nationalist Party, the Irish Freedom Party, etc., 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 what damage do you think it has done, the possibility of getting progressive legislation in the future, or amendments in the future? Because they have smelled blood now and they have success in their nostrils, right? Yeah. And I'm just wondering, because they have mobilised, be interested to see now in the local elections, will it follow on from that?
Will be interesting.
It will be interesting. And
you think there will be a follow-on electoral?
Well, I think the Shinners played it very badly. They're supposed to be, waiting to be crowned. I think they played it very badly. I just think that at the end of the day, the space was given over to conservative forces within this country, which at the end of the day have no interest in single parents, have no interest in same-sex marriage, have no interest in, welcoming anyone into this country, right? And they were given a victory on a plate. Maybe it was just by accident. Maybe it was, if you're really Machiavellian about it, you say, well, the government are, let this happen to warn people that this is what can happen. I just think that these people are buoyed up by this. McDowell, I thought he retired. I thought he gone off to some nursing home somewhere. Do you
remember when he was in? Do you remember when he was in the PDs and Mary Harney was leading the PDs? I think it might have been 97 or maybe it was 2002. They actually ran an election targeting single mothers.
That's right.
Yeah.
In the way people seeking international protection are targeted now. And targeting single mothers, they're getting the houses. We talked about it on the first one. But I don't agree, John. Time will tell. I don't think it has any implications electorally.
No.
Because what we know about the Irish electorate so far,
I think
when it comes to elections, it's about money and power.
Well, I listened to...
It's slipshod, John. It wasn't... You can have all the arguments you had about it, but they didn't appear to me like a government who wanted to win those referenda and that were going how to do it.
No.
The other thing is, as a population talking to people, there wasn't any great debate in pubs or bars or anything about this. It wasn't something that was causing people to lose sleep at night.
No, but you've given credibility.
Yeah,
you've given credibility to those forces.
Saying is they did it in a slipshod way that they didn't really care. And you see the reaction since they're not all that worried about it either. It didn't cost anything and there's no price to pay.
Well, 98% of the electorate who voted in Ballyfermot, 98% voted no. Right? Clear cut, right? People before Prop were out this morning on their Facebook page welcomed the decision. As if they promoted it themselves.
And they were yes.
And they were yes.
Yeah, that's the cynicism.
So that's what you have. But I don't know, listen, I just look at my own kids, right? Right up until the morning right up until the evening before the vote, they hadn't a clue what they were doing. Not a breeze what they were doing. They're asking me to explain to them, and so I was struggling in my own little brain trying to explain it to myself at that stage. But I don't know, I just think I watch this space. I just think that there's a bit of oxygen being given to that unholy alliance.
I think their support won't grow any more than it has, than there already is over that. They might get some successes by individual candidates. I think the one thing this referendum showed me is that the government will play fast and loose with these type of... They've lost 13... Sitting governments have lost 13 referenda over the years.
Yeah.
Like, it's often a time to give a government a message. But referenda, where they've been for real change, like gay marriage, like divorce, the people have come out in their droves to support it.
Repeal.
And I think there's a real opportunity, if they had have come up with the Water referendum, or even any of the other ones in relation to housing and health, that people would see those as the type of issues that they do want to go out and vote on.
We'd like to think
and
so.
I think what this government have done is they've sidestepped those issues and pushed these social issues in as a kind of a take your mind off that And I think what we need to do is re-energise the whole campaign to get the referendum we need to change the society in the way
Where
we
is the
want.
water referendum, Brendan? I mean, that bill was passed in both houses, wasn't it?
Yeah,
Passed in
well,
the Senate.
you're talking in a meeting on it in the
Yeah, a
near
couple of
future.
weeks' time, yeah.
So basically, Joan Collins' bill, we call it the Right to Water Bill.
Yeah.
Joan, working with senior councils, myself and the unions involved, brought forward a constitutional referendum, a wording. I think it's at the second stage of legislation, but it's been there for about 3 or 4 years now. At that stage, it's been going on for 7 or 8 years.
Was it a cul-de-sac?
All of the parties, apart from Fine Gael, Fianna Fáil, Labour, the Greens, Sinn Féin, I'm not sure the Soc Dems explicitly, but I think they would, and maybe they did, maybe I'm misjudging, I'm just mixing myself up there. All of the parties committed to this in the run into the general election 2020.
It's on the manifesto.
And I think you're right, Stevie. I think if that had been the referendum last Friday, I think there would have been a class-led mobilisation behind that. Because that's a referendum that would have been, I think, not universally popular, but I think there would have been a majority in favour of it.
Absolutely.
I think it would have got passed. I think, but so you'd have, and I think the government would think that too. So why did they not do it? Why did they choose this blancmange and fall flat on their faces, as opposed to picking something real, something that would have engaged the electorate? I think they did it because there's real economics, there's real power behind the water referendum. It is ostensibly to take or to ensure in perpetuity that the public water and sanitation system is in public ownership. And we all believe, we all know, that at some future point, and elsewhere in the world already, this is seen as an asset for privatization. They just won't go there. They only were forced to put into the manifestos because of public pressure. That public pressure has dissipated in terms of the water campaign.
I don't think it'd be very hard now to get it.
No, on that issue,
again.
I don't think it would be very hard to get it going again. But they won't do it for economic reasons. And I think the only effect the referendums will have on the election, I think any chance of having an early election is now gone. I think if they had got them through, the government might have felt they had some wind behind our sails. So I think they'll hang on for grim death now until the spring of 2025. And that's when the election will be now. But I think when it comes to the election, we're back to the same old quagmire. People will vote in the election in what they perceive to be their economic interests. And the parties of economic privilege, Fine Gael in particular, but the Greens also, even though they think they're otherwise, their neoliberal agenda in government suggests they are exactly what they are, a neoliberal Green Party. And Fianna Fáil can't build a house to save their lives. I think we'll be back into a situation where housing, the health service, migration, unfortunately workers' rights doesn't get much of a mention, and we've very poor workers' rights, as we know, by European standards. The collective bargaining issue doesn't seem to be getting much momentum, even though I think a majority of the public would be in favour of that. That's another referendum they could have had. So I don't think it'll make any difference, and I agree with Stevie. I don't believe that the far right electorally will make the gains that they think they will make.
I think they might in the locals.
They might in the locals. They might get a few councillors in here and there, but I think for them it's about noise and it's about chaos. And that's kind of what they do. That's what they've done in England through the National Front for years, and that's the rule book they're following here. And it's about chaos, it's about disturbing people, it's about social media noise, it's about all of that. And I think it turns voters off, to be honest with you. It turns a majority of voters off. But why do Irish people vote, it seems to me, against their own economic interests?
Yeah, well, I listened to the news just before we sat down here now, right? Positive news, right? Workers are going to get massive pay increases over the next 3 years. They're going to be net better off than they have been for decades, right? With pay increases. Inflation is dropping, right?
No, inflation is rising slow.
Rising slower. Sorry, yeah, it was put across as if it was dropping, but it's rising slower, right? So at the end of the day, they're starting to drip out the good news now. Drip out the good news, and when they get enough media coverage of their propaganda, right? A lot of people just say, listen, I have my house, right? I have a job, right? And voting for so-called progressive parties, right, won't be an option. The status quo is a very comfortable place for some people. I mean, you go to Fox
Well, it's
Rock.
not some people, it's for our people.
Well,
No, because that's who votes. I mean, our members, our friends, our communities, our families, if they weren't voting for Fine Gael Greens, they wouldn't be elected.
But there's nobody under 50 voting Fine Fáil, Fine Gael.
Well, I don't know. There's
not,
the
Stevie.
numbers, but I think that the real issue for me, just going back to the referenda and the water one, is it's informative, the ones they won't hold, because it links into their policy of commodification of everything that people need to live. And, you know, we have this class, for want of a better word, who've commodified health, they've commodified housing, massive profits for a small circle of people. They want to commodify water, that's why they haven't had a referendum. And it's the way the country has developed, particularly for the period the government for the last 11 or 12 years when Fine Gael have been there. I would say, if I was a Fine Gael supporter, I would judge them as the most successful government in the history of the state, with Leo Varadkar as one of the most successful politicians that they've ever had.
Why? Explain why.
Because he has delivered that type of society into their hands.
For who?
Into the so-called ruling class, the elite, the wealthy, the powerful, the people who benefit from all these things, the people who don't need public health or public education or public housing or public transport. You know, if you look at the society and the way it's changed in that period of time since the crash, and the transfer of wealth from ordinary people and working people to that elite, it's frightening. And the fact that it's almost gone unnoticed, it's happened in incremental steps. And now we have people, instead of seeing them as the issue, most of them see them as something they aspire to be themselves.
But Varadkar sees himself as socially progressive and economically conservative.
He is.
That's the way he sees himself.
But that's what he is.
And that's the European card he plays. That's the block they're in Europe, right? Everything has a price, whether it's wind turbines off the sea out here off Bray. That won't be state investment. That'll be us giving over our wind turbines and our wind farms over to a French company, and I think it's a Dutch company, and they're going to build, you know, the biggest wind farm in Ireland, you know, 2 miles off this, 2 miles out to sea off this pub. But they've been very little better for the Irish economy, other than we'll buy the electricity into the grid off those companies. So that's the type of economics they have. So you're right. A referendum on housing, a referendum on water, challenges that narrative, and it challenges
referendum
that
on collective bargaining,
and one on collective bargaining, not anything on workers' rights. That's why there's always kicked down the end of the list. You know, put in a cul-de-sac, and we drag it out to the next election, and we get re-elected again. Now you might get a kick in the backside the next election. Maybe you're right. A lot of young people, right, will not vote if the polls are correct. The Shinners are gathering all days, and young people under the age.
Don't know where they're going, but they're not going to Fine Gael and Fine Fáil anymore.
Well,
A lot of them are going to Australia.
A lot of them are heading to Australia. That's right, Steve.
Yeah.
A lot of them are. But it'd be interesting to see. And I think the Shinners missed an opportunity this time. They rode in to prove that they were electable, right? That they were reasonable. They would be reasonable in government. So it was a yes vote. And now I think that was a big mistake. I think they had an opportunity to stand alone, with A2 probably, but to stand alone basically, and say, listen, no, this is bull. This wording is nonsense, right? There's a different way of doing this. But they didn't do that. And I think that's now becoming a trend. And the closer you get to a general election, some of the left-wing parties, not all of them are progressive parties, will want to try prove their credentials as being, we're in safe hands, the economy's in safe hands. It'll be an orderly handover. You needn't worry. Your money in the bank and your deposit accounts will be safe with us, right? But there won't be a run on the banks. And they need to prove that to certain people in order to get numbers out to vote in their favour. They need to prove it to Europe. Europe doesn't close down.
Well,
they have their masters.
No matter who we're talking about, and I want to go through a couple of examples here. No matter who we're talking about, the one thing that isn't part of the political discussion from any quarter, other than the far left, but look, from any quarter, is a redistribution of wealth downwards.
That's class politics.
But let me just explain. Yeah, it is. Let me just explain what I mean by that. I'm constantly amazed in the online space, but also in just casual conversations we have with people from Dundalk, people from Swords, people in Ballyfermot, as you say, Finglas, ordinary Joe and Mary Soaps, people like us. And they kind of say things like, Leo's a disgrace, he's not representing us, as if he's supposed to. As if they've suddenly woke up to the fact that Fine Gael, the party of wealth and privilege, are not representing the people of Finglas. They've never represented the people of Finglas since the year the state was formed in 1922. But that's still a surprise to some people. And then alternatives come along from time to time, and we've seen a few possible alternatives ourselves. We've seen that the spring tide, that fell on the rocks. We're living through a potential Sinn Féin alternative. And it seems to me that they're losing some momentum and losing some opportunity as well, because they're trying to speak to everybody.
That's the problem.
They're trying to be kind of Blairite. When Tony Blair got in 1997, he decided he had to maybe nearly be a blue Tory to get elected.
Well, he was.
And give, well, he wasn't originally, and give assurances to people like Rupert Murdoch and all of that sort of stuff. And then, but if you look at the new spaces, then, if you look at the far right, if you look at Aontú, although Peadar Tobin himself is slightly different, but if you look at Aontú generally, but if you look at the fascist parties that are emerging, you look at the candidates and the senators, and I'm not going to dignify them by naming them, all those right-wing racists that are coming along, they'll talk about everything, except one thing: redistribution of wealth to the class they are claiming to represent. They will not talk about that. They don't talk about it, they don't promise it, they don't write policy papers on it, they don't analyse it. So even the parties who are springing up, or the individuals who are springing up, going around the country harassing librarians or whatever they're doing to entertain themselves, they'll talk about how everybody's rotten, everybody's corrupt, everybody's a paedophile, everybody's something. They'll talk about everything except who's got the money and how do we redistribute it into our housing estates, into our villages, into our towns, into our communities. They don't talk about that. And fascists have never talked about that. In fact, what fascists do, ultimately, and we could see this by studying fascism in Spain and Italy and Germany and across Europe, when they get elected, they actually protect wealth and privilege. They protect the power base of the elites. They do it by shutting down debate, by shutting down free speech, which they all start off claiming to represent. So when are we going to see a situation where some party from the centre, from wherever, is going to actually say what is wrong in this country is?
Is it explainable?
Of course it's explainable.
In Joe's own language.
Just read an Oxfam report and see how many billionaires there are and how many people can't get houses.
Yeah, and how does that translate into votes? How does that translate into political conversation at the bar, in the shop, on the street? How does that translate into that?
I remember growing up, my father, who's long past now, was a trade unionist, and he was a shop steward in the shoe factory in Dundalk. And one of the first conversations I had with him when I was old enough to discuss these things was about the role of the trade union movement. And my father believed that the role of the trade union movement was to educate the working class, not represent the working class. That was secondary to him. Educate the working class. And what he meant by that was explain and have conversations about who is running the country and for whose benefit and why it's not for our benefit.
You used to say
and the trade union movement have we ever picked up that mental?
Yeah, we did. After that spring tide you spoke about that crashed out on the rocks, we did many political education classes with our members, Stevie's members, indeed your members, I think.
Political economy,
political economy. And I sat in on
most of them went far right.
Yeah, no, I sat in on a lot of them, and you could see the light bulb coming on, right? When it was explained about the brass plate, what do you call them, offices down on the quays, washing millions and millions of billions of pounds through there every night. When the top 10 people in the world own 50% of all the wealth, all that, and you could start. People were starting to join that dot, Stevie. They were, and
The thing is,
I think when it hit the rocks,
continue. Nothing else happened
but
afterwards.
Nothing happened after that. And
Like they
that
got
was
this kind of lesson, which said this is the way of the world, which was quite stark, which got them all worked up, and then they walked out the door and they never heard anything again. But I think the interesting question John asked is how do you get people at a grassroots level in working class areas to join those dots? How do we educate them as the reality?
But if they join the dots, where would they go?
Yeah, but well, you have to have something in your own head for it. But the other thing I think is interesting in a so-called Catholic Christian country, the way that the church protected wealth.
Absolutely, it's all wealth.
If you take the most basic message of Christianity, then the Catholic Church couldn't be any further away from it.
Yeah, any more socialist than originally.
Yeah, and so in a so-called Catholic country, we've had the church protecting the wealth and the political establishment protecting the wealth, almost as if that's the way it has to be.
But why in 100 years, Stevie? Why in 100 years? Or you can take 1937, the year of the Constitution, if you want. But any time between the counter-revolution, 1922, and now, so 102 years. Pick any point you want. Why, in a century, have our class not joined those dots and said the last political movement to join the dots and aspire to an egalitarian country were the people who wrote the proclamation in 1916? Because any time we get any further, and I'm not getting in a debate with the far left. Sometimes I think
the Democratic program, I think, with the more socialists,
keep power where it is the way to behave.
So, job is to win.
So suppose it now 200,000 people in the country joined the dots and said, you know what, why are all these billionaires not just paying their tax and helping us build public housing? Just that issue now. Where would those 200,000 people go?
Brendan, if you start talking about class,
the people often lead though. I mean, the one thing I would say about the big social change referenda, that came from the people, not from the politics.
Yeah, but it's social change.
Yeah,
a lot easier to achieve than economic change.
But look, obviously somebody has to try and harness that view but it has to be manufactured first.
So even Leo Varadkar looks like a liberal when you look over the social change.
Yeah, but Brendan, listen.
But I'm not interested
Stevie.
in the social change. I'm talking about the economic change that will actually impact on working people's lives and their families' lives. How do you do that? But to do it first, you have to then have the debate that we've started here in relation to wealth and power and influence and how it works and how it doesn't work. That debate doesn't happen.
I haven't heard anyone use the term class or class consciousness in years. And I know if I spoke to my kids about it, they say, yeah, there he goes, look at reading those books upstairs and Karl Marx and Lenin and all them books upstairs. That's gone out with the Indians, right?
You don't have to go back that far, though.
No, you don't have to go back that far, but I think we do need to have a debate about class. Because class is at the root, and the class is at the root of everything. It's at the root of economic power, it's at the root of, distribution of wealth. And I think we need to have the conversation. But we need to have it in simpler terms, right? We need to put class in the context of our health system, class in the context of our housing, class of our education.
I'll stop there now. The health debate was won.
Yeah.
Right? The health debate was won on a class basis. The entire country and every party in it signed up to a progressive health system, a single tier health system, free at the point of use, and it was called Sláinte Care. Even Fine Gael had to sign up to it, such was the public demand.
Where is it?
And it's nowhere.
It's somewhere around with the water referendum.
It's with the water referendum, the same cul-de-sac.
It just doesn't exist.
Yeah.
It just doesn't exist. So, and what I'm struck by, and just to draw a parallel with Leo Varadkar again, is on my mind today for some reason. It's the 40th anniversary of the miners' strike. Now, in 1984, people will say the miners' strike was a battle between workers and the Tories. The miners' strike was a class war. The miners' strike was the moment. And anybody that thinks it didn't impact us, I'm going to tell you how it impacted us in a minute, was the moment when Margaret Thatcher waged a class war against the most powerful trade union at the time in Britain, and was not up for compromise and was not up for settlement, and neither was the union, by the way. So there was no compromise on the table. It was a winner takes all battle. Thatcher won it. And Thatcher then, on the back of that, imported an economic model. What's the first thing she did after that? She sold the housing stock.
We followed her.
And what's the first thing we did? Fianna Fáil government, we sold our housing stock. Our mothers and our fathers and our grannies and our granddads, our mothers and fathers in my case anyway, were offered at knockdown price to buy their council homes. And without understanding any ideology or at the time...
We were killing the stampede.
Yeah, and we're killing the stampede, and the rent went up from 3 or 4
and they wouldn't have got too many votes by saying don't buy them.
That's right. And now there's no housing stock.
Well, there's loads of housing stock, but it's been bought by budget
yeah,
funds up
there's
here
no
in
public
Carrick
housing stock.
Yeah.
There's no public housing stock. And the grandkids of the people who bought those, Thatcherite policy, implemented here by Jack Lynch, actually after Jack Lynch, Charlie Haughey and Bertie Ahern then, Gareth Fitzgerald, a Thatcherite policy to give those people, most of whom have now passed away, their own homes. The homes have been taken out of circulation and their grandchildren can't get homes. So a class war was won in Britain, and the outcome of it in housing, Thatcher then went and privatised everything that would move. Well, we didn't exactly go down that route now. She literally privatised everything.
There was a Thames though.
There was we mucked up the privatisation of Aircom, and that killed it a bit. But she privatised everything. She privatised water, she privatised electricity.
Aircom blew up in his face.
Aircom blew up in his face, yeah. So, but at the end of the day...
We're still nibbling away at the buses. 10% of routes have been privatised.
Yeah, they're nibbling away.
Nibbling away, they haven't gone away, they're still nibbling away at it. But at the end of the day, Brendan,
it's
seriously,
not privatisation as much as liberalisation.
Well,
what they did over here now is they blame Europe on like the power market.
Competition.
We had the cheapest power in Europe.
We did.
And the most
in
expensive.
order to bring in competition, we had to put the prices up because it was too cheap.
Right.
Now, in the name of Jesus, competition is supposed to be bringing you lower prices. But the competition in this instance was about making more profits, not about lower prices. It's outrageous, you know, and you end up paying more for power as an industry, so it makes you less competitive with the people who imposed the liberalisation on you in the first place. I mean, it's one of the most outrageous things that's ever been done.
But on the houses,
but it's an example of commodification. Again, we had an electricity market, we had good prices, everybody was happy, except the people in the elite, the golden circle, weren't getting that from it. So how do we get our chunk? So instead of privatising, which would cause war here, they liberalised.
They tried it here, but they never got away with it.
But
There was a very strong group of unions in ESB at the time, I think.
But they liberalised it to the effect that they now have their fingers in the pie.
Yeah, but going back to the housing thing, right, and the sell-off of, you know, vast quantities of public housing, stock of public housing that was built up over decades, right, and which would have rolled over to generation to generation. The selling off that into private hands, right, it created a whole group who were indebted then with mortgages. First time, you know, anyone ever had a mortgage, you had to go for an interview, you got a mortgage, it was 30 grand, 40 grand, you bought your council house, probably even less, you bought your council house, then you became a homeowner, right? Then your kids aspire to be homeowners. They were told living in council estates and council houses was a failure. And I think at the end of the day, that's still the class now. That's still the debate now. It's you know, building houses, public houses, for the citizens of Ireland, right? There is that stigma. It's been stigmatised. Public housing has been stigmatised. I mean, you have the private builders now have to give, what is it, 10% or 5% of all houses they build have to give them to
yeah, but they get compensated for that out of public money.
Well, are compensated for it, right? Are compensated for it. But you nearly have to hide the council tenants somewhere, split them up and hide them all over the estate somewhere so they don't congregate together.
What's even worse, they pay the council off so they don't have to do it.
Yeah.
They give the council more money so they don't have to put public housing in, so it doesn't devalue their estate.
Yeah, so I think the whole class debate is great, but I think if you try to talk to someone about class, right, middle class, upper class, working class, you know, the elites, if you try to have that conversation with them, it doesn't really mean anything. You've got to get into the textbooks.
Well, let's park the class word. I want to ask you a question. Let's park the class word. I believe that there should be a redistribution of wealth from the richest in the country to the poorest in the country.
It's not how progressive
in order to fund essential services like healthcare, education, housing, transport.
Is that not called progressive taxation?
Now, imagine there was 200,000 like we. We don't have progressive taxation.
Well, is that not what they'll say? That's progressive taxation. The
Yeah,
more
but
you
we
earn,
don't-
the more you pay.
We don't have progressive. Taxation is not just about income tax.
Yeah,
The income tax is only one aspect of taxation.
absolutely.
But the point I'm saying is, so I imagine that I'm not the only person in Ireland who wants a redistribution of wealth to some extent, from the richest to the poorest. I imagine there's hundreds of thousands like me. Stick with
Only
me.
if it's not your own wealth, you
No,
just
stick with me.
redistribute.
No, absolutely. If it is my own, I've no problem with paying tax,
Yeah, well,
and I don't think I pay enough tax.
right, good man.
Right? So that's not an issue. But having said that, I imagine there's hundreds of thousands feel like that, but I don't just want that to go into a Marxist or Trotskyist vacuum of protest. I want that ideology of having a society structured better to be in government. So, and now I want to join a political party. Who do I join?
Oh, if you may forget about it,
Like to change.
form your own. You may form your own. But listen,
you see,
Brendan,
that
in all
should-
honesty,
that should
I'm
have been
asked a serious
that
question.
should have
Yeah.
been the space the Labour Party occupied.
Well, we know that.
No.
Sinn Féin lost already.
Well, I don't think Sinn Féin ever occupied. The Sinn Féin space has always been the 32 county space, and everything else comes a long way second. And they'll do whatever they have to get there. In terms
What about
of
the socialist republics, Stevie?
actual wealth distribution as part of their policies over the years, they were an integral part of the old Labour Party. Now, did they push it? Having sold themselves 3 or 4 times, could anybody trust them to do it? But that's where that's where that lay. It doesn't lie anywhere at the moment. That's the
So
real
both
part.
of you are telling me,
go on.
for the want of joining a party who A, wants to see a redistribution of wealth to fund public services downwards, and also to aspire to being in government to deliver those policies, there's no party I can join in this country.
Well, I can't think of one at the moment.
No,
Can you?
No.
No, that makes 3 of us then again.
So the
That's
only
a
problem is
surprise.
we're in Ireland, we can't form another party.
But the problem,
what
again,
usually happens.
Brendan, listen,
And even if I turned into a racist overnight, I can't join any of them because they don't want to do it either.
public housing estates have been demonised. Taxation, progressive taxation has been demonised, right? You know, you're a failure unless you own your own house by the age of X. Now, the thing is, there's a lot of kids nowadays they tell you are going to be failures, but maybe they'll fight back.
The majority.
Maybe they'll form that.
Where are
party.
they going to learn a class analysis?
Maybe they'll form that party that you're talking about. Maybe they'll stand up. Maybe it's their time to stand up. Because my father had to stand up and fight for his own house, for rent, for rent controls, for decent public housing. So they had that fight. Then there was a middle bit where that fight was taken away because public houses were built. Ballyfermous, the cabinets.
I grew up in one.
They were built.
I grew up in one.
But now
good.
they're not there anymore. So it's a whole new generation going to have to fight. And I don't have the answers to it all. But maybe they're going to have to fight.
Have you got the money for your kids and grandkids though?
No, well, listen.
The
When you're
bank
croaking,
of granddad.
when you're croaking, that's what they look at. That's their deposit in their place. That's the truth of it.
They see their homes now as the inheritance to leave to their kids.
That's it.
They bought the dream of owning their own house. You know, I mean, I grew up in a corporation house. We paid the rent. The rent house was around the corner. But it was more than that. We tradesmen that painted the houses. They used to have those guys, almost artists, that did the whole doors with the comb.
Yeah, you ring up the council if there was something wrong with your pipe, and a plumber would come around and fix it.
So outside of having that, you actually had good employment as a result.
Yeah.
And then as you made the money from the rent, it created the money to build more homes. So you had a steady income stream, as well as a housing stock, you had an income stream.
And the local authorities were employers of skilled tradespeople.
Yeah. So, I mean, the whole package.
Sounding very radical now, Stevie.
Yeah, but if you think that we had that as children, and you break that down now, most of those jobs that we're doing are now done as nexus, not even getting tax out of them. You know what I mean? Everybody has their own little van and their own little job. You know what I mean? So they're money working, but a lot of it is on the black. A lot of the housing stock is deteriorating because it's not being maintained the way it was, as there's elderly people who don't have the money. So it's a model that worked perfectly well has been dismantled purely on the basis of profit.
Well, I've heard of comments from people who I know very, very well, younger people in their 30s or 40s who have got their own houses. You know what I mean? Sure, why should they get a house for nothing? That's what it's seen as. That's the way it's been portrayed, that you get a council house, you're getting something for nothing, right? I had to save, scrimp and save, work 2 jobs. My husband had to work and my wife had to work 2 jobs. We didn't go out on the weekends. We scrimped and saved. We got a few off my parents, and we went into a £400,000 debt mortgage, right? That we'd be paying off till we 60 or 65 or even older, right? But that's seen somehow as success. And when the state provides a house, right, at a reasonable rent, you're seen as a failure.
Leo Varadkar gave them that lexicon. Leo Varadkar said,
well, it's more
we can't have people who want houses for nothing.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's what he said. That.
Yeah.
And just to finish off, I was really, I really thought it was an eye-opening moment. Now I'd made my mind up. We started with the referendum. Maybe we finished with the referendum. I'd made my mind up to vote yes on the marriage referendum, and just to explain that, even though the wording was a joke, you know, I was divorced at one stage. I'm on my second marriage, so I was divorced, and I had 2 kids from my first marriage. Still have 2 kids, and I like to think, in fact I do think, that my kids weren't in any less of a family when I was divorced than when I was married to Paulie, or indeed Mandy now. And I don't think the Constitution reflects that. So for that reason and that reason alone, although I do understand the wording was clunky the whole lot, and I'm not the slightest bit upset by it, by the way. It doesn't change my life one iota. But I thought it was a real, so I was going to vote yes, no anyway. The care referendum was just, but when Leo Varadkar did his interview last, just
Tuesday,
the week before the referendum, the Monday or the Tuesday, on the 6th one, or the 6th show, and he basically let the mask slip. He outlined his view of the state, which was perfectly encapsulated, by the way, in the wording that was in the referendum. And that's no coincidence. He outlined a vision of the state being divorced from the care of its most vulnerable citizens, and practically all of that responsibility being passed on to families and dependents. And that's how they see the world. It was like a repeat of Margaret Thatcher's infamous "there is no such thing as society. You're on your own."
Well, I remember
philosophy.
I remember one time when I was a long time ago, I was president of the Irish Congress Trade Unions, and I was brought in a delegation to meet higher civil servants. These would be top civil servants now, got secretary level and principal office and senior or vice principal office, about collective bargaining, right? About workers having the right to be able to join a trade union and have that union effectively act on their behalf, right? I'm sitting facing about 20 of them, all well-paid civil servants, all 100 grand plus, all with state pensions, all with sick pay, parental leave, the whole, you name it, they had it, right? And every one of them proceeded to tell us that it'd be impossible for workers to get collective bargaining. It'd be the end of the world. It just wouldn't. It just couldn't. The economy would collapse in a heap. The Americans would pack their bags and go home. And I had to say, I jumped across the table and I said, listen, the cheekiest, my members in supermarkets and shops throughout Ireland, right, earning small money, paying their tax on their PRSI, they pay your wages and your pensions and your sick pay, and you're telling them, and you're in the union, and you're union negotiating.
They've got all the benefits of it.
And you're telling me that my members can't be in the union and won't have collective bargaining rights. Shame on you. But that permanent government and that elite is there, and that's controlling the agenda, and it's very hard to break it.
The point that Brendan made about care is interesting, because you can link it back to the housing. It's a silly thing, but when my mother lived in the house and she was paying rent, if she got ill in her old age, she would have gone into a nursing home and it wouldn't have cost her anything. So they sold her the house. Now she owns the house. She gets ill, she goes into the nursing home to take the house back off her to pay for it. So, you know, they give them one hand and taking it with another, you know what I mean? And like every person whose elderly parents, obviously most people, if they're lucky enough that the parents live that old, face what you're facing at the moment, John. If they're not able to look after themselves, the family are no longer capable of looking after them, They need professional help, and they say, right, give us your gaff.
Come here, maybe final question to you, right? I mean, the weekend that's in, it's St. Patrick's weekend. Should we be going over the bowl of shamrock over to Washington?
No.
Stevie?
Absolutely not.
Right. We're all agreed again.
We're all agreed again.
But
We better stop this before we find something to fall out of.
Yeah, I think, given what's going on in Palestine, there isn't anybody on the planet should have anything to do with the Yanks. Ultimately, they're the ones dropping those bombs.
Yeah.
And they can dress her up any way they want. It's disgusting for any politician to go over there and make any semblance of handshake or camaraderie in circumstances where one phone call could stop that.
Absolutely.